Thank you, Mr. Adihetty. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to the panel discussion of this session. I would like to invite the five speakers of the session on stage, along with Mr. Lasitha Manchanayake, who will be the moderator for this session. Mr. Manchanayake is the CEO of John Keel's Logistics.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank Mr. Rohan Maskorala for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. First of all, let me introduce the expert panel here once again. We have Mr. Vivek Kale, founder of Team Global Logistics on my right. Mr. Vineet Malhotra, Director Kale Logistics Solutions. It's an IT solutions provider on my left. Professor Rashin Bapu. He has a PhD in data science and a director CEO of our venture consulting group. Mr. Dinuka Pereira, he's a COO of Lanka Pay. Mr. Viraj Adihetty, founder of Port Expert. So let me start the discussion with a few questions to my expert panel right now. Starting off, with Vivek, so you all have already implemented certain technologies in India, and we would like to know what those are and what the disruption it has created to the industry, and how you managed that change when there was disruption to the industry. Any examples that you can give?
Yeah, so basically, we had a big challenge of, this is already a few years ago, about 10 years ago or 10 plus years ago. The business that we are into is LCL consolidation, and there used to be a challenge of filing the manifest for LCL consolidation. So the custom system, we had to file the LCL manifest with the shipping lines, and the shipping line then in turn, aggregated all the manifest, and then they submitted it to the customs. What the discussion that came in was, we were allowed to submit the manifest as and when we were ready directly to the customs, and the shipping lines then mapped their manifest to our manifest. So there was no, it really fast-tracked the entire system. Accuracy of data was there, and the manifest submission, happened on time. Because of that, the bill of entry, then subsequently customs came up with a system with a rule that all the bills of entry had need to be filed 7 days before cargo arrival. So had this not been done, the filing of manifest, bill of entry 7 days prior to cargo arrival would have never happened. So I think this is how adoption of technology disrupted the working, and it worked to the benefit of the industry.
In fact, my next question is to Vineet. You spoke about the hidden cost savings that we can create from adopting these technologies. So can you elaborate a little bit more, and what are these hidden costs that we can save?
Yeah, I think, there is this misconception about the fact that any new system, when it comes in a sense, it obviously, yes, it will benefit, but upfront, there is costs to be paid or investments to be done. Now, when we looked at deep into it, and we realized that that's not the possible model which will work, at least in the low-cost geographies or in the subcontinent. And that's where this whole emphasis on looking out actually at the costs which are involved in the international trade. So what we did was, there are some visible costs of freight and, let's say, terminal charges and all. So that if you keep aside, there are hidden costs which are involved. So we did a time and motion study, which is to follow a shipment right from the time that for example, on an export side, the exporter is looking for, looking to, get some rates from agents, and thereafter moving the whole shipment till the time it is put onto the vessel or on the aircraft. And we then divided this into several parts. We looked at the fact that what is the overall time which is spent, what kind of documents get exchanged, hence the cost of printing and storing and handing over the documents, physical visits which are happening, the fact is communication which is going on. Because of non-transparency and not connected ecosystems, the dwell time which is essentially likely to go up and hence and therefore certain amount of productivity. And finally, certain costs which will come sometimes because there is no transparency. So we looked at all of this, and the idea was then to look at this hidden cost which nobody realizes and what could it be per shipment. And as you would have seen, the overall, and then we actually looked at if the system came in and we did that study as well, what could be the savings? So the savings on a shipment level, whether you take it on a per TU or a per airwaybill level, is anywhere between $30 and $50, which is the kind of money possibly somebody will make on a shipment as against, so some of those savings essentially need to pay for such systems. That's the way that we look at it.
So in that case, we are talking about costs that are, ultimately passed on to the customer, and in fact, we can talk about, how it will ultimately result in lesser cost and lesser cost of trade, which will, kind of expand and we can increase our trade, and it's ultimately good for the customer. Am I right?
That's absolutely, that's been our model. We have said that, we currently do in 50 odd airports and ports worldwide. And these are all from the US. Incidentally, there was some mention about the fact that US possibly is far ahead. Our impression and our experiences, they're far, far behind in terms of such technologies. Okay. So what we do is we essentially look at the investment to be done clearly by us in building something like this, maintaining it, providing IT infrastructure, etc. Everybody kind of monetarily saves. One, the governments and stakeholders don't need to invest. We are assured of a return on investment over a longer period of time. And two, each stakeholder is paying from the savings. So that's a win-win model for everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vineet. Let me direct my next question to Dinuka, actually. So, talking about Lanka Pay and what you have implemented in Sri Lanka, so you would have had to deal with a lot of government authorities and regulations in order to, implement such a kind of a big change. So what was your experience on that, and can you share that with us?
So we are a company that is regulated by the central bank. We are partly owned by central bank as well. So when we are trying to implement a system or bring in new technology, we have our direct customers. I'm taking the Lanka Pay example. Our direct customers are banks, but the products and services that we offer are consumed by the bank's customers. So our consumers are the citizens. Whenever we conceptualize a product or we try to bring in some technology, we need to first get the central bank approval because most of our products are governed, even the charges are governed by the central bank. So that is not an easy process. Right? But just to take into your industry, I'm sure some of you would have experienced this. We have a product called Lanka Pay Online Payment Platform, which enables online payments to government organizations, including Sri Lanka Ports Authority. So what it allows you to do is, through your internet banking portal, you can make online payments. So same can be done to Sri Lanka Customs, Department of Inland Revenue. But Sri Lanka Ports Authority during the COVID time, I believe, took a decision saying only online payments are accepted to clear goods or whatever. And at that time, some of the banks had not come on board with our system. And those customers were inconvenienced in a way that they either had to go to another bank and open their accounts because they couldn't make that transaction through their own bank. So sometimes you would be forced or compelled because of certain decisions taken by the government or the regulatory authorities that you deal with, where you have to change the way you work. So because when this happened, there were a number of questions being asked as to how can that be done. but it was not something Lanka paid it. It was the Sri Lanka Ports Authority which decided to only deal with online payments. For an example, Sri Lanka Customs now, when you submit your documentation to Sri Lanka Customs, you need to digitally sign them using Lanka Sign certificates. There is a discussion going around saying that it may be made mandatory. So again, that's a situation. If you are not having that capability, you could lose some days, and some days could mean in demurrage and all that quite a significant amount in terms of the damage. So there are changes or challenges which are beyond your control, but you have to be alive to those challenges.
Wonderful. So touching on something that Vineet also spoke about, and it will link up to your conversation with the government. So this single window and this cargo community hub, what do we need to do, Vineet and Dinuka, in implementing such a technology to a country, and what does the government have to play? What role does the government have to play?
So I think, from what I know, obviously the SLPA along with the ADB has taken the first step towards essentially looking at a study in terms of what is needed to be done around a port community system. I think that's something which is currently going on. The fact remains that single window discussions with World Bank in Sri Lanka has been going on for the last 10 years. I think it's time now for some of it to translate into action. Now, I do realize the fact that, in the current situation, money could be a problem, investment could be a problem. And that is where models of the type that we are talking of on a PPP basis, where the investments could come from willing partners, essentially towards, a proven model could possibly come in. And then also the various trade associations need to obviously come together and look at this as something for nation building. From my interactions with everybody here, everybody is very, very positive about it. I think it's at an inflection point where some action would possibly happen in the near future.
Thanks. So you touched on the difficulties that we are facing and the challenges that we are facing in the country as well. So my next question is to Professor Rasheen. Had we invested more in technology, would we have faced these challenges a little better? And would we have not faced such challenges with economies, the economic problems or COVID challenges if we had invested a little bit more on technology?
Yeah, of course, Lasit. I mean, all of us basically want to be competitive and want to, meet challenges. And we are competing in a, digitalized business, environment. So all these factors taking into consideration, what we really need is to look at, efficiency and, value for money, and all these factors needs to be, considered, and for you to be competitive. And if you are globally competing, you can have the best location basically. You can have the infrastructure. But if you are not geared to globally compete in terms of, to meet efficiency and to meet challenges in investing, if you are not investing in new technologies, and if you think these investments are, huge, and if you are not even willing to talk to partners who are, willing to, explore opportunities and give you an opportunity to give an hearing, right? Then we are far back actually, we are far behind. And we need to, speak to, people who could, the consultants and, technology service providers, and bring them on board, discuss with them, and look at, competitive rates, look at competitive, models. And after that, look at your company, infrastructure, whether you could human effort, and whether you need everything on board at once, or you need to start small and, adapt on over a period of time. So, the name of the game is basically, development of technology and investment of technology. There is no other way. And logistics basically is going to be, AI driven, in time to come. It is already happening for the last 10 years, but we are far behind, and actually we have the psychosis basically in terms of putting our hands into these, things. So, but we are, all of us, individually willing to invest on a smartphone which is launched, on the same day. And we are waiting in the queues basically to buy them at any given price, even if it is 400,000 or 600,000 rupees. All smartphones are sold out and people are basically booked. But still, to do a business actually, we are thinking twice whether to invest or not. So this is where, when we start, thinking like this, apparently, we will be far behind, and we will not be able to compete with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful takeaways from Professor Ashin. One final question to Viraj, actually, before we open up for questions from the audience. So what is next, Viraj, for Port Expert, and when do you think you can implement it in Sri Lanka?
So thank you, Lasita. So Port Expert, what is next is basically, like I said, we are currently an extremely niche product. It is a homegrown product. That was something that was conceptualized, built, and engineered here in Sri Lanka by developers and as well as experts in the industry here. And while we're not currently live here in Sri Lanka, we are live in the GCC region. We are going live in Qatar and Bahrain as we speak. And the next steps of Port Expert is that we establish ourselves as one of the trusted sources in the market, and we expand from there, because like all of these gentlemen were discussing and you were presenting earlier, the scope where we can go with digitizing the supply chain and the port community systems and all of these areas is a massive scope. And I don't see that any one application needs to be limited in that scope. It's all of these things are applications and sort of solutions that can work in tandem and work in correlation with each other. So I think those are the next steps that we see for Port Expert as well.
Wonderful. So we can take a few questions from the audience. If anyone, we can send the mics across. Okay. So move this one. Yeah. Can we get a mic across, please?
Good evening. I'm Senthil Kumar Subramanian, coming from Tuticorin in India. My question is to Mr. Viraj. So I was quite eager to know, you are talking about Port Expert and container inspections. Have you rolled out this in any of the port?
Yes, we are currently in the process of rolling our pilot run out in Qatar and Bahrain. We are working with CMA-CGM at the moment to launch it with some of their clients. So the thing is, it is a empty container inspection. It's not for the container inspection per se. It is the empty container inspection process that's happening by the shipping lines or the shipping line agents. So we're rolling it out with CMA-CGM with some of their certain clients in the GCC region.
So empty container inspection means prior to dispatch the container to the shipper's factory, right?
Yes, so at the consignee's warehouse, once the container is unloaded, before it is either brought back to the port or the depot or sent back into inventory, there is an inspection process, a manual inspection process that happens currently, and that is what we're trying to digitize and automate using this system.
So the driver is the one who will execute this process, right?
Yes, the driver, we are deputizing the driver to conduct the initial the inspection, but it can actually happen depending on what the standard procedure of whoever the shipping line is. It could even be one of their agents who is sent to the location. But the overall application architecture remains the same. It's done using a simple mobile phone. It doesn't require to have sort of its own scanning material or any other hardware devices for it.
Okay, because the moment you say a driver is going to do the inspection, then there will be some limitations, because maybe he can do the verification of damages. That's the only thing he can do. But otherwise, there are few more things need to be again inspected. For example, if the container is the history of cargo, if it carries some DGs, and then some smell test also need to be done. And then if there is a leakage on the roof, then you have to close the door and check for leakages. So all these things can be done, or it is?
That's actually a very good question. So what the driver does is does the physical inspection of the container, but then it is sent to a back office that's held by a separate location, which has access to all of the information regarding the container, what it was carrying, the cargo previously it was carrying, all of this information. There is going to be a double verification there in terms of what, any other information that's required, which is happened separately, and the driver doesn't really do the damage verification. He just conducts an initial inspection of the container and submits the images and the required material for the back office or the secondary inspection or the tertiary inspection to happen and verify that the container is indeed in good condition, it is intact, and it can actually be utilized in wherever it needs to be.
Okay, then it is a case of again dual inspection, right? It's again additional cost, right?
Actually, we think of it more like, I think this was addressed as well. It is more than cost, it is an investment, because right now the inspection process is a linear inspection process where it has to actually go through there's a lot of cost lost in hidden costs. In what we're doing right now, the costs are actually transparent. The inspection process is done and the time saving is massive. So the inspection that's done by the driver and then that is conducted by a back office agent, it doesn't really have to be something that it has to be on the physical location. That allows the driver to actually do the inspection and the physical, like the secondary inspection to also happen in real time rather than having the driver to come to all the way to the port or any other inspection location for this to happen.
Yeah, that is what. See, it's maybe very predominantly useful for the shipping lines if they would like to carry out the inspection at the port itself rather than taking the container all the way to MTR. And again, they'll have to do the lift on, lift off, and again sending a surveyor. So this would be a very useful tool. That's what I raised this question.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? So kind of a very common question to all the panelists here. So yesterday at the conference and when we went for tea, there were 3 queues of sandwiches and tea, and the people had been queuing up in 2 of those stations. And I found out that there was a 3rd station and there was no queue, and I just went to it. So there's obvious demand and supply imbalance in any supply chain. So this is a basic example that I saw. So, can these technologies that what we are trying to do, even for the example, the QR system that was implemented in Sri Lanka recently, a very basic system, very technology that is quite old, but it matched this demand and supply to an extent that it was manageable. So anything that can help us in throughout the entire supply chain, how do we kind of optimize and help individual parties in these supply chains, improve, optimize, anything that you all want to share on that?
I'll ask the experts to first go and then I'll answer.
Vineet, I think you have something to say.
I think, Vivek also mentioned, there's this concept of something called the marketplace, okay? What the marketplace, for example, just to give an example first and then get to, if you have, for example, if you're buying on Amazon, what are you trying to do? There are people on the supply side, there are suppliers, and you are on the demand side because you are the guys who are buying. So it is trying to match the supply and demand. So obviously, and based on certain algorithms, the supply and demand can kind of gets matched. Now you apply it to logistics, okay? In fact, we run a marketplace platform, which is looking at the freight supply and demand on a dynamic basis, and obviously uses AI at the back end. So basically, if you have, and the good examples are more of trucking rather than shipping freight and air freight, is you have trucks typically, wherever they are, domestic or international cross-border movement, one-way movement is guaranteed, the other one is not guaranteed. I mean, you typically then work your pricing like that. So if there is a way, and these platforms do that, they look at the fact that what is your capacity, and linked to that capacity, what is your price? Now, these are things currently in vogue, and several such platforms have mushroomed. In fact, on the last count that we did a survey, 600 of such platforms exist across the world, but not many which are multimodal. In fact, we are now building possibly the world's most comprehensive multimodal logistics marketplace, which will essentially do this: supply chain, supply-demand matching, and capacity to price linkage.
Wonderful. So we have about 5 minutes more. If we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So if we don't have any more questions, I would like to hear from all of you a final statement, and just taking maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute on supply chain technologies. Maybe start with you, Vivek.
Yeah, I think you said application. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and immediately which can be, yesterday we heard in the opening session about so many terminals coming up in Colombo. And then there was one big issue of ITTS, inter-terminal transfers. I think technology can be used because for inter-terminal transfers, you require equipments, be it barges, be it trucks, to move from one terminal to other terminal. And you have connection to the mainland, to the gate automation. Now, if this entire movement can, movement between the terminals as well as in and out of the terminals can be automated in terms of visibility of information, and basis which the equipments can be planned, be it the trucks or be it ability of staff to man the gates or barges to move from one terminal to other terminal. I think that's one area. If somebody, the government can start working on it from today. So when all the terminals are operational, you'll already have a very good system which will support the smooth movement in and out of the terminals as well as between the terminals. I mean, that's one thing I could.
Thanks. Dinuka?
So there's no doubt the technology, automation, all that is the way to go. You can't live without it. But my advice would be, when you choose and pick your systems or the technology that you want to implement, don't blindly adopt your technology. See what it gives you, what are the challenges in terms of implementation, and take a conscious decision as to how you want to go about implementing or embracing this new technology, because failure by trying to adopt a new technology could be much more disadvantageous to you than not adapting that technology.
Yeah, Professor Rashid.
Yeah, basically I'm not going to talk about, technology as such. I think we have, heard enough and more, things. But only thing is, as Sri Lankans, basically, first we'll have to change the attitude, right? And thinking out of the box. I think these are things which we have been, speaking in corporate training sessions. But only thing is, these things have not still been, embedded in our system, right? We are, everywhere we, hear about system changes, but we are not in that, we are not part of that system actually. We just have been talking for over a year, over a period of time, but we are still in the era of, if we have been told to do something, we are geared to do it. But we don't think on our own and try to implement to be very competitive. So, attitude needs to be changed. And for us to thrive in this, any industry, logistics or supply chain or whatever industry basically. So if we have the fear psychosis, also we will be laid back and we will be nowhere and we will be out of this game. Thank you very much.
I think, there's been a lot of talk the walk up till now. Now it's time for walk the talk. Okay. And we have a request also. For example, we've partnered with Dialogue, and we all know that QR code, that you speak about, how that was so useful in the times that it was needed. So if we are given this opportunity and a model of PPP, which is a model which is followed everywhere, where the investments could come from outside, and we could possibly bring in this much needed cargo community system for the country, and that obviously could be a game changer.
Wonderful, thank you.
I think I just add on to what Professor Rasheen said. Like it's change the mindset that we need to look at, and then also digitization and the usage of technologies in not just supply chain but everywhere else in this industry. We also need to keep a close eye on how we can actually bring all of these solutions and make this whole industry a little more sustainable than what it is right now. So I think that's one of the key things that we need to focus on as well. So I think digitization is going to drive a key pillar in doing that in all of these industries across the board.
Final word, basically, common sense, and common sense. That's all.
Thank you very much. So, in fact, everyone summed it up perfectly. So common sense, it's not a cost but an investment. We have to take a longer term view, adapt or die, change our mindsets, action over plan, and walk the talk. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being an extremely helpful panel. And thank you very much to, once again, the organizers for giving me the opportunity to moderate such a wonderful session. Thank you.